quiet new nurse arrives at one of the busiest hospitals in the city, polite, reserved, almost invisible. She's mocked by senior staff, ignored during emergencies, and treated as dead weight when lives hang in the balance. No one knows where she came from. No one asks why she never flinches under pressure, until one afternoon, when a Navy helicopter descends onto the hospital grounds, and everything they thought they knew about her shatters. Before we begin, pause for a second. Where are you watching from today? A city hospital, a quiet room, a night shift, a phone in your hand at 2 a.m. Drop it in the comments. And if you believe stories about silent strength deserve to be told, please subscribe. Now, let's begin. The surgeon's voice cut through the emergency bay like a blade. Get her out of here, she's freezing. No one looked at the woman standing against the wall at first. When they did, it was with impatience, with irritation, with the kind of contempt reserved for people who slow things down when time is measured in heartbeats. She stood perfectly still, hands folded at her waist, blue scrubs hanging loose on a frame that looked almost too small for the chaos around her. Her badge read Elie Park RN, new hire, 3rd week. The patient on the table convulsed again, monitors screaming their warnings. Blood slicked the gloves of the trauma team. Orders flew back and forth, overlapping, colliding. Someone dropped a tray. Someone swore. Alina didn't move. Did you hear me? The surgeon snapped, finally turning fully toward her. I said get out. You're in the way. A few nurses exchanged looks. One rolled her eyes. Another muttered something about dead weight. Someone laughed under their breath. Alina met the surgeon's gaze calmly. Her eyes were dark, steady, unreadable. Then she nodded once and stepped back, flattening herself against the wall to make space, exactly as ordered. No argument, no defensiveness. The patient died 3 minutes later. And not a single person noticed the way Alina's jaw tightened as the flatline stretched on. Seattle General had a way of swallowing people whole. The hospital never slept. Fluorescent lights hummed without mercy. The air smelled of antiseptic, burnt coffee, and fear that never fully dissipated. Alina Park moved through it like a shadow. She arrived early, left late, took extra shifts no one wanted. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then, sparingly. Her charting was flawless. Her patient outcomes were solid. But she didn't fit. She didn't gossip. Didn't complain. Didn't panic. That last part unsettled people most. In a place where adrenaline was currency, Alina spent almost none. Senior nurses whispered that she was timid. Doctors assumed she lacked confidence. One resident joked that she looked like she might faint if someone raised their voice. They were wrong. But Alina never corrected them. When a code blue echoed down the hall, her pulse barely changed. When family members screamed in grief, she stood present but untouched. Like a mountain watching a storm pass. Only once, in the break room, did anyone notice something strange. A young nurse caught sight of Alina washing her hands. Not the quick scrub required by policy, but a slow, methodical ritual. Fingertips, wrists, nails. Exactly 20 seconds. Exactly the same every time. And when a tray clattered to the floor behind her, Alina didn't flinch. Not even a blink. Before Seattle General. Before the scrubs and the badge and the carefully neutral expression, Alina Park had lived an entirely different life. One measured not in patient rounds, but in extraction windows and casualty counts. She had been 22 when she first learned what real silence sounded like. Not the quiet of a hospital corridor at night, but the suffocating stillness before an ambush. The kind that pressed against the eardrums and made every breath feel too loud. The smell of dust and oil. The weight of gear cutting into her shoulders. The knowledge that one wrong step could erase everyone beside her. Alina had served as a combat medic attached to a classified Naval Special Operations unit. She wasn't officially listed anywhere civilians could see. Her name didn't exist in public records. She learned trauma medicine with bullets snapping overhead and helicopters hovering just out of sight. She learned how to stop bleeding with one hand. How to intubate in darkness. How to decide in seconds who could be saved and who couldn't. She learned how to carry bodies that never came home. The memories lived in her muscles more than her mind. The way her hands still remembered the exact pressure needed to clamp an artery. The way her nose still caught phantom scents of cordite and blood when alarms went off. The way her sleep fractured into short, vigilant intervals. After her final deployment, after the mission that went wrong and the teammates who didn't make it out, Alina had made a quiet promise to herself. If she was going to keep saving lives, it would be somewhere no one was shooting back. Civilian nursing school had been almost surreal. Simpler, slower. Louder, in its own way. People argued about protocol while lives bled out. People mistook volume for competence. Alina let them. She didn't need recognition. She needed purpose. And she needed to believe that saving one life at a time, quietly, anonymously, might balance the weight of those she couldn't save before. Seattle General ran on hierarchy. Doctors gave orders. Nurses followed them. New nurses learned quickly to stay invisible. Alina did that better than most. When senior staff dismissed her suggestions, she stepped back. When residents talked over her during rounds, she waited. When a charge nurse reassigned her to menial tasks during high acuity shifts, she accepted without protest. The injustice wasn't loud. That was the worst part. No one outright bullied her. They simply didn't trust her. Didn't listen. Didn't see her. During a mass casualty drill, Alina identified a simulated internal bleed that others missed. The instructor brushed it off. The scenario ended. Later, when the oversight was revealed, no one traced it back to her. During a real trauma, multi-car pileup on the interstate, Alina prepared equipment before being asked, anticipating needs before orders came. A doctor snapped that she was overstepping. She stepped back. Patients noticed, though. An elderly man with shaking hands once whispered, "You don't look scared," as she adjusted his IV. Alina had smiled gently. "I am," she said. "I just don't let it drive." He squeezed her hand like it was a lifeline. The bystanders, the other nurses, the residents, the administrators, watched all of this in silence. Not malicious. Just compliant. It was easier to let the hierarchy stand than to question it. And so the tension grew. Invisible. Pressurized. Waiting. It happened on a Tuesday. The ER was already stretched thin when the call came in: high profile trauma inbound. Details were scarce. Only that the patient was critical. Only that time was running out. A middle-aged man was rushed in under armed security. His injuries were catastrophic. Internal bleeding. Compromised airway. Signs of shock. The trauma team mobilized instantly. Alina was assigned to the periphery again. As the team worked, Alina saw it, the subtle asymmetry in chest rise. The delayed capillary refill. The faint change in skin tone that screamed hidden hemorrhage. She stepped forward half a pace. "There's... not now." The attending snapped without looking at her. "We're busy." Alina stopped. The patient crashed moments later. Panic rippled through the room. Orders overlapped. Someone shouted for blood. Someone else called for imaging. Alina moved anyway. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't argue. She simply acted, placing her hands exactly where they needed to be, applying pressure, adjusting positioning with surgical precision. "Who told you to do that?" Someone barked. Alina didn't answer. The patient stabilized barely. Afterward, in the corridor, the attending physician confronted her. "You disobeyed a direct instruction," he said coldly. "You're lucky this didn't end worse." Alina met his eyes. Her voice was calm. Understood. No apology. No explanation, just acceptance. That night, she stayed late again. Cleaning. Restocking. Preparing for a future no one else could see coming. In her locker sat a small, unmarked phone. Powered off. Untouched for years. She didn't look at it. Not yet. The next morning, a patient coded in the ICU. Sudden, violent, unexpected. Alina was first in the room. She took control without announcement. Her movements were fluid, decisive. She worked around the arriving staff, guiding without commanding. For a moment, just a moment, everyone followed her lead. The patient survived. Later, as Alina washed her hands, the charge nurse watched her with new eyes. "There's something different about you," she said slowly. Alina dried her hands. "We all bring different experiences." That was all. But elsewhere in the building, something else was shifting. An administrator received a call. Short. Urgent. Classified enough to make her straighten in her chair. She glanced out the window toward the helipad, unused for months, and for the first time the hospital felt watched. The helicopter appeared just after noon. At first, it was just a shadow crossing the glass. Then the unmistakable downdraft rattled windows and sent loose papers skittering across desks. People froze. A Navy helicopter descended onto the hospital grounds with practiced precision, its presence impossible to ignore. Security scrambled. Administrators rushed outside. Staff gathered at windows, confusion rippling through the building. From the aircraft stepped uniformed personnel, calm, purposeful, unmistakably elite. One of them approached the hospital director without ceremony. "We're here for our medic," he said. The director blinked. Your medic. Yes, ma'am. His gaze was steady. Chief Petty Officer Elena Park, we need her. Now. Inside the hospital, Elena was restocking supplies. When the message reached her, she closed her eyes briefly. Just once. The hallway parted as she walked. Not because she demanded it, but because something in her posture made people move. She emerged into the open space near the entrance as the uniformed officers turned toward her. For the first time since she'd arrived at Seattle General, Elena stood fully visible. The lead officer came to attention. Combat Pro, he said quietly. We have casualties inbound. They specifically asked for you. Every whisper died. Doctors stared. Nurses stood frozen. Administrators looked suddenly unsure of themselves. Elena nodded once. Understood. Before she turned to leave, she looked back at the staff, the same people who had dismissed her, mocked her silence, questioned her competence. Her voice carried, calm and clear. Silence doesn't mean weakness, she said. It means I've already learned which battles are worth my voice. No one spoke. The helicopter lifted moments later, with Elena aboard. In the days that followed, the truth surfaced. Records were reviewed. Credentials quietly verified. Stories emerged, classified ones, spoken in careful tones. The attending who had dismissed her avoided her name. The surgeon who had ordered her out of the trauma base stared at the floor during meetings. No reprimands were issued. None were needed. When Elena returned a week later, she was the same, quiet, composed, unassuming. But the hospital had changed. People listened now. When she spoke, rooms went silent, and when emergencies hit, eyes turned to her, not out of authority but trust. Once, a resident asked her how she stayed so calm. Elena smiled faintly. Because panic costs lives, she said, and silence saves them. Not all heroes announce themselves. Some walk softly through fluorescent corridors. Some wear scrubs instead of medals. Some carry wars you'll never see, and still choose to serve. Respect isn't always demanded. Sometimes, it's earned in silence. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone underestimated, unseen, or quietly strong, share your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe for more stories that honor the heroes who never ask to be seen, but deserve to be remembered.